الوهم وأكرمنا من نور الفهم وسهل أخلاقنا بالحلم وجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we have arrived at this ayah behind me. Alhamdulillah. But last week we spoke about in the ayahs that have preceded this, we spoke about Jannah and Jahannam. And we spoke about the way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alluding to resurrection, and how the Mufassirin have had a detailed discussion on resurrection before this ayah. And the reason why I bring this up now is because some of the ways in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or some of the methods in which Allah employs to prove without a shadow of a doubt that resurrection is something that will take place, is by means of four general proofs. And the first way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does it is that He implicitly refutes it. He just says, for example, He says to them, yes, by your Lord, you will surely be resurrected. He says, you will be resurrected. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, inform them of it. That's the one way. And the other way is what Al-Razi has mentioned in his Tafsir, which I am going to, inshallah, read because it is so beautiful and so emphatic. He says that proving the possibility of resurrection by demonstrating Allah's power. And for those who have been here in the Tafsir from the beginning, from Surah Al all the way to the beginning Ayat of Surah Al Baqarah, I've noticed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used nature itself when trying to explain to us the significance of certain people. In the parables He used fire, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explicitly says He's the one that created you, your Lord, the one who created you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then speaks about the water that comes from the sky and goes into the earth, all of these things. So Al-Razi ties all of this in. He says that the method that Allah employs involves proving the possibility of resurrection by highlighting Allah's ability to create phenomena that resemble resurrection. And this is demonstrated through the following ways. The first one is the creation of life through what Razi says, semen. He says that Allah draws attention to the creation of life from semen, stating that, have you seen what you emit? Allah says that. He says, have you seen it? Is it you who created, or are we the creator? Now, the reasoning here is that Al-Razi says that semen originates from the fourth digestion process. In other words, scattered throughout the body. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gathers these scattered particles into a body and later gathers them again into seminal fluid, and then which is then directed into the womb. If Allah can gather these dispersed parts for the creation of life, what would prevent Him from doing it so again to resurrection? So He uses that as the first one. I thought it was very profound, subhanAllah. Because we don't, as human beings, we don't think in those terms. So to highlight it to such specificity, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could do something so amazing. And then the resurrection is nothing compared to that. That is the first one. The second one, he says, the second argument is the growth of plants from seeds. He says that Allah also presents the analogy of seeds growing into plants, asking, have you seen that which you sow? Is it you who makes it grow, or are we the grower? All of these ayat, as you notice so far, are from Surah Al Baqarah. Seeds, when placed in moist soil, should logically decay. Yet they split and sprout into life by Allah's command. The same principle applies to the gathering and the resurrection of human bodies from scattered particles after death. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bring forth plants from seeds, how could He be incapable of resurrecting human beings? This is Al-Razi's second argument. The third argument is the descent of rain from the sky. Again, it's not something that we would automatically associate with resurrection. So that is why I'm emphasizing it, because this is actually, the connection is profound. Allah reminds us of His power over the elements, stating, "Have you seen the water that you drink? Is it you who brought it down from the clouds, or is it we who bring it down?" Water is a heavy substance, Al-Razi says. It ascends into the sky, right? Defying its natural tendency. This requires a powerful being capable of overriding natural laws. If Allah can gather a dispersed water particle and send them where they are needed, how could He not gather the parts of a human body for resurrection? SubhanAllah, profound. And then he says the fourth argument is the creation of fire from trees. Again, Surah Al Baqarah. Allah points to the creation of fire from green trees. Allah is very specific, He says green trees. Fire and trees are composed of opposite elements. Fire is subtle and rises, while trees are dense and grow downward. If Allah can unite these opposing elements, He surely has the power to assemble living creatures for resurrection. Again, extremely powerful. Then the Mufassirin go on and they say that the third method in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala affirms the resurrection is the testimony of the four elements. There are many ayat in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the four elements to prove or to testify to the existence of resurrection. Similar to the famous ayah where Allah says in Surah Al-Hajj, He mentions the earth, and you see the earth barren. But when we send down rain upon it, it stirs and grows. This is something that anyone can see. A land that was once lifeless, nothing grows there, barren and dead. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends rain over it and it comes back to life again. There was nothing there. That's the third. The fourth and last one, which is applicable now to this ayah over here, is the rational proof of resurrection. Right? The first one is the parallel between the creation of the heavens and resurrection. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making the parallel known that if He can create everything in this universe, right, then He can surely create you again. That is the logical one, first one. And the second one is the first creation as proof of the second. Right? And that's where we are now. Now this is what brings us to this one over here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now starts off, كيف تكفرون بالله. As some of you might know, we've used the word كيف حالك, how are you? It's the first thing they teach you when you learn Arabic. But كيف is a word of question. Say, كيف حالك, how are you? And that's the same of here. It is كيف تكفرون بالله. How can you takfur, disbelieve in Allah? So first the Mufassirin say this is istifham majazi. It is not istifham haqiqi. In other words, it is not a questioning how, but rather a rhetorical how. It's a rhetorical question that Allah is now asking. And istifham majazi has of two types. Istifham ta'ajjubi and istifham inkari. Right? The first one is that when you ask the question, the rhetorical question, to deny something or negate something. And the second way is to ask something in a rhetorical way to show amazement or admiration or astonishment. Right? Ta'ajjubi. So the Mufassirin say in this ayah here, Allah is saying, كيف تكفرون بالله, employing both, not just one. Allah is saying it both. كيف تكفرون بالله. SubhanAllah, the emphasis in this must not be lost on you. كيف تكفرون بالله. How can you disbelieve in Allah? Now, takfur comes from the word kufr. We've already discussed the etymology, the root of kufr, kafara, right, which means to hide something, conceal the truth, in other words. Right? That's why a farmer is known as a kafir, because he conceals the seed in the ground. Right? We've discussed that already, the literal meaning of it. Now, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking here, كيف تكفرون, remember, He's still addressing all of mankind. Right? So again, to all of mankind, He's saying, كيف تكفرون. How can you on the one hand deny? Because that is what kufr is. It is a denial of the truth. Right? How can you deny? But it also has the meaning of ingratitude. How can you be grateful? Ungrateful. How can you deny? And how can you be ungrateful to Allah? This is what amwatan means. Right? It comes from the word maut. You were dead. You were dead. The first issue that it answers is that in order for you to be dead, you would first need to have had life. Right? And now this is the first issue that it answers. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying you were dead. But as we all know, we were, in order, the Mufassirin say that the definition of death is infisal al-ruh min al-jasad, the separation of the soul from the body. So as we know, before we were given life, right, we were in alam al-barzakh, alam al-arwah, where the souls reside, right? That's where our souls were, but we had no bodies. So then we could not have passed through the process of death, which is the separation of the ruh from the body. So the Mufassirin say here that why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decide to use the word kuntum amwata? You were, as in the past tense, amwat, dead. Why did Allah use the word dead? Why did Allah say you were ma'doom? You were non-existent, because that is what you were. You were non-existent. And you ask anyone, whether it's Muslim, non-Muslim, atheist, whatever you want, Buddhist, what were you before this? You were nothing. Nothing, non-existent, not an idea. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. Was there not a time that came when you were not even a memory? لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. Not even a memory. Right? So then, the correct, well not the correct, but the most precise meaning for amwat would be ma'doom, non-existent. But now why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say amwat? The Mufassirin say that Allah is using a principle in the Quran called targhib, or rather taghlib, to ghalab an shay. In other words, to say something, right, that has the connotation of non-existence, or rather the connotation to not have life, right? In order that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can make two links at the same time. So that is the purpose that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses here. And so He's trying to make connections for us. So yes, you were non-existent. So inshallah I will come back to it when we get further down. But for now, know that the meaning of amwat over here is not death as we know it, but it is non-existence. Right? The first one. So the Mufassirin say, kuntum amwatan, you were non-existent. And then, fa'ahyana. Then immediately from non-existence, you were given life. Life came. Thumma, you meet. And then, you will die. Now, let's stop there quickly. The first thing is now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, how is it possible that you can deny and disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you were non-existent? And you must admit to that. You must admit that you were non-existent. Every person will. Whether you believe or don't believe, you must admit that you were non-existent. And if there was a point that you were non-existent and then came into life, and you can see with your own eyes that you won't taste death because you've seen others taste death, so you know it is coming. If three of these things are already confirmed, then why is it that you deny that you will get life again? It's a powerful argument, subhanAllah. Very simple, but very, very powerful. It leads to a much broader discussion, which inshallah we have time to discuss, where the Mufassirin talk about the four proofs for the existence of Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal that is not from the Quran, not from the Quran, in other words. It is from creation itself. The first one is, which is called Butlan al-Murajjah bidun Murajjah, or Butlan al-Rujhan bidun Murajjah. Right? That something can be preponderant, right? without someone making it preponderant. The second one is Budlan at-Tasalsul, negating the continuity, the principle of things that are going to go on forever and ever and ever and ever. Budlan ad-Dawr as well. So these are negating principles as to the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why are they negating principles? Because you have to ask yourself a simple question. Where did you come from? The answer is going to be, I came from my father and my mother. And ask the person another question, where did they come from? And they'll give the same answer, and so on and so on and so on. Is it rational that you would say that that person came from themselves? That there was no beginning to it all? Is it rational? Dr. Booty asks a question. If someone asks a neighbor, where did their flower come from? The one neighbor will say it came from the other neighbor's seed. And so on and so on and so on. But eventually, the question becomes, where did the first one come from? And they make mention here that it is not possible for the human mind to comprehend that there is not a start to something, that it just started by itself. And this, Dr. Booty says, is the fundamental issue with atheism, is that they believe that they have allowed themselves through trickery and deceit, and what they would sometimes call scientific magic, to delude themselves into believing that something can start without an originator, that it itself started itself, as if to say the first atom split itself, as if to say that all the molecules and all the materials in the world came together by itself because it reached a point where it couldn't stand being non-existent anymore, and so it came into existence. There's no way that a human mind can accept this. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can put such powerful meaning in such a short sentence or verse of the Quran. كيف تكفرون? How can you be ungrateful and disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who took you from non-existence, which you admit you were not nothing, you were non-existent before. فأحياكم, and He gave you life. You have the life. The life is testimony. Here you are. ثم يميتكم. You all know people who were once and are not anymore. Imam al-Razi says, he wrote a poem which I translated, but the Arabic is much better, but the English still has meaning. It says, my relatives will pass by my grave as if they had never known me. SubhanAllah, it's profound words, but it rings true for all of us. ثم يميتكم. You will taste death. ثم يحييكم. And then you will be given life again. ثم, the last part of it, إليه ترجعون. And then you will return to Him. The Mufassir can say that it's ثم إليه ترجعون can be recited ثم إليه ترجعون or ثم إليه ترجعون, meaning that if it's turji'un, you will be returned to Him. It's almost like you will be returned unwillingly. If you don't want to go, you will be returned anyway. You are, I think it's Sha'arabi who said, it's like you are on a conveyor belt. Whether you like it or not, it's moving towards Allah. Even if you do nothing, you are being returned to Him. And then if it is tarja'un, thumma ilayhi tarja'un, it is as if Allah is speaking to the believers and saying, you will return to Him. So in the one it is the passive tense, you will be returned to Him. And I want to say, you will return to Him willingly. In other words, you want to meet your Lord, Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal. You have prepared for it, you've believed in it, you've sent forth provision for it, and then you want to tarji'un. So this is the linguistic meaning in the turji'un and tarji'un, the different readings of this word. The Mufassiri now, there's a different matter now that gets addressed here, in that why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala differentiate between He will give you life, as in we all understand this to be resurrection, but then He says afterwards, ثُمَّ إِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ, and then you will return to Him. If you are resurrected, are you not returned? This is the question, right? Which is a very good question. And so the Mufassirin, they all give similar answers in that they are saying that when you are resurrected, right, then there is a period of time whereby you will be questioned, and you will have to pass over the sirat, the bridge, and all of these things. That is it's almost like an existence unto themselves. You know, Hisab, Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day of standing, the day of judgment. You know, so that is one. And then when you return, ثُمَّ إِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ, the Mufassirin say this is about your Dar al-Qarar, Dar al-Qarar, the life that you will eternally abide in, whether it's going to be Jannah or whether it's going to be Jahannam. But خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا, as we read in the previous ayat, you will abide therein forever. So Mufassirin say this is the distinction Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making for us. Another question that is asked is, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say فَأَحْيَاكُمْ over here? Fa uses the word fa over here, أَحْيَاكُمْ fa. But all the other places Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses thumma, and thumma. So fa is for immediacy, and thumma is for there's a delay between it. Right? So that in the words there is a delay in. So when you were non-existent, فَأَحْيَاكُمْ, so there was an immediacy from non-existence into life. So that is the meaning of here of the fa. Whereas in between this thumma yumitukum, there's almost like there's delays between these different periods in your existence. Thumma yumitukum, in other words, then you will taste death. It also is indicative of the fact that you will remain in this dar. It's almost like this is now a new period. So the infisal, the separation of the ruh from the body, which is what death is, that's the definition of death, the separation of the ruh from the body, is now, there's an experience for you in this. As if to say another existence, another world, where you experience. So that is the connotation of thumma over here. So, and then thumma yuhyikum, again, there will be periods in between it all, and thumma ilayhi turja'un, periods. Now, this Sha'arawi and Ibn Ajiba say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in his, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do this, he captures the entire journey of the human being in one verse. I mean, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala catches the entirety of the human journey, just like that. Whether you like it or not, you are taking steps towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards your return to Him. And this argument that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the rational argument that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offers. This, if you understood, can be relayed to an atheist, to anyone who does not believe, and they will have to admit to the first three parts of this without question. There's no way they cannot accept it. It is there for them to see. And then the question becomes, how can you not believe that you will be brought back to life again? Very powerful, subhanAllah. After this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moves. Allah moves to the next ayah, which is هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُمْ. Now, هذا هو الآية. This is the ayah. هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى إِلَى السَّمَاءِ فَسَوَّاهُنَّ سَبْعَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. Now, the Mufassirin say that the first part of this, huwa alladhi, is linking back to what came before. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that is going to do all of this, is taking you through this entire life journey. Huwa alladhi, He is the one, khalaqa lakum, who created you. Ma, or rather created lakum, for you. Ma fil ardi, whatever is in the earth, jami'an, all of it. SubhanAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ibn Ajiba says, he says beautifully that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, كيف تكفر? How can you be ungrateful to Allah who brought you from non-existence into existence and then created everything around you specifically just for you? How can you be ungrateful? Even more so, how can you disbelieve when the very thing that exists around you is for you? Sha'arawi says that هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. Allah, he makes a distinction between ayat where Allah says that He has سخر لكم ما في السماوات والأرض. He has subjected for you. Allah has subjected for you what is in the heavens of the earth. But He has not made it subservient to your will or to your essence. For if that were true, then you would be able to stop the sun, and you would be able to control the waves and the wind. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done, He has made it, He has ordered it to be good towards you in certain respects, or rather He has ordered it to be Sha'arawi says not under your control. That is not the word. He says He has made it so that you can use it for your benefit. Yes, that is the best way to describe it. He has made it in such a way that it is beneficial to you, and that in and of itself should be an ayah of it was made for you. Because He says something very interesting. He says, and I never thought about it this way before. He says that everything that is around you, all the phenomena around you, what stops it from rebelling against you? I never thought of it. I was like, subhanAllah, yes. I mean, they are all making tasbih of Allah, so they are believers. They believe in Allah, they know who created them. And then they see here the human beings who are rebelling against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What stops them from rebelling against us? From the sun colliding into us, from the waves just consuming us all. Subhanallah. He says it is the irada of Allah. It is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and His command to them. He has commanded them not to. It is the command of Allah which stops them from crushing us, from the mountains and crushing us. And this is no more evident in the fact that this is not under control, in the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us glimpses of what it looks like when it is not. Zilzal. What is the purpose of earthquakes? What is the purpose of tornadoes? What is the purpose of volcanoes erupting and just covering everything in lava? It is to show you what Allah is doing for you all the time. Because these don't happen all the time. Now and then, to remind insan who is in charge. And subhanAllah, this is what Sha'arawi is highlighting from this ayah here. Allah is telling us and affirming that He is in charge. The next thing that the Mufassir would say is that هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. This is al-asl fil ashya al-ibaha. Al-asl fil ashya al-ibaha. They're saying that the foundation of everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us is permissibility. هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. He's given you everything this is for you. It's for you. To use, for the benefit, for your enjoyment, for your subsistence here on this earth. He's saying so. The default is halal. Everything is permissible. So then where does haram come from? And this is the discussion that happens here. It's quite an interesting discussion actually. And it ties in what we've learned so far about the munafiqeen and all of these things that they do and why they are so evil, the consequences. They say that if you think about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided you, let's take for example the fruits. They appear quite a bit. Fruits that Allah has provided. فواكه, ثمرات. And take one fruit in particular, the grape. The grape in and of itself, is it beneficial? Yes, it is. It is very beneficial. But is it possible for the human being to pervert the grape so much that it becomes harmful? Yes. Yes, it is. And then it becomes what is known as khamr, alcohol, and it intoxicates the mind and corrupts the soul and makes a good-natured person into a bad-natured person. So in the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made everything permissible for us, but human beings have corrupted it, and so it has become haram. So the haram comes from the action of the human being, and not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making things difficult for you. This is the way to look at it, and to keep your Lord in high esteem, and not to think of your Lord in a way as a Lord who is punishing and a Lord who is severe, because this doesn't go in with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal. He's one who wants the best for you. That's why at the beginning of creation, which we will come to inshallah, there were no laws. Many of the first Anbiya that came about, they didn't come with laws. They came with what we would consider morality, moral fiber, and ways in which to interact with their Lord. Tawheed, essentially, you could call it. But not with laws. That only came afterwards. It's a period where the first community, came. That is when the laws came. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to understand this. So that's why He says it in this way. وَالَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. He has created, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just said وَالَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, and would have held the same meaning. He had created for you whatever is in the earth. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala went a step further and said جَمِيعًا, all of you. And this word is understood to mean it is for everyone. Right? But some have understood it to mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided this for everyone's use, in that no one has any ownership over it. Everyone owns it together, almost like. So then there's no room for individual ownership. So they've gone this way, which the Mufassirin, majority of the Mufassirin have negated. They say this doesn't, it's not in line with the meaning of this ayah over here. The meaning of the ayah is that all of humanity can benefit from this. But individual ownership of certain things is also within the ambit of this meaning. Then the next part, ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى إِلَى السَّمَاءِ. So, over here now, the ayah literally means, then, istawa, يعني Allah. Allah then ascends or straightens in the direction of the sama, the sky. The first issue that arises is istawa, as you know. Is a massive discussion about istawa, in that it now describes Allah's movement. And so the question becomes, if Allah moves, does that mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a specific form, or is in a specific space? And did He move from one space to another space? This is the conversation that ultimately comes from this word. So, the qa'idah, the rule, whenever dealing with things associated to Allah's dhat, or Allah's sifat, Allah's essence, or Allah's attributes, is that laysa kamithlihi shay. There is nothing like Allah. And whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Himself, that is the truth. But there is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Laysa kamithlihi shay. Nothing resembles Him at all. So when a king istawa ala al-arsh, when a king ascends the throne, right? Or when the Amir ascends the throne, or ascends the chair, Al-Amir, he ascends the chair. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala istawa ala al-arsh, ascends the throne, laysa kamithlihi shay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what He says about it, we believe in that. But there is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Umar there was this incident where a companion kept asking about this. He kept saying, how does Allah istawa? How does Allah istawa? He used to go around to the different companions. How does this happen? How does this happen? And they said, go to Umar ibn Khattab. So he went to Umar ibn Khattab. And the Umar said, come here. I will tell you. Come here. Tell him how. He came. And he gave him a whack on his head. And then he asked him, do you understand now? And he says, yes, he understands. I understand. And he never asked those questions again until the passing of the Khalifa. And then he started asking again. I think it was Imam Malik or maybe Imam Ali radiallahu anhu who said that al-istawa ma'ruf, that the istawa, that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to himself here, this istawa, it is ma'ruf, it is known. Because Allah informed us, so we know. Al-istawa ma'ruf. And he says, wal-kayfiyya majhul, but the how, that is unknown. We don't know. That is unknown. وَالسُّئِلَ عَنْهُ بِدْعًا, and asking about it, that is bid'ah. This is what they said about it. But it is good to know what the meaning itself means. Istawa means to straighten something, so you can istawa a stick, you can make it straight. Or so that's the meaning of it. So then it says ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى إِلَى السَّمَاءِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directed himself towards the sky. In other words, he metaphorically directed his attention now towards the sky. This is from a metaphorical meaning of it. So now another issue arises, and this is now an aqidah issue, is that the question becomes, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only make a decision in the moment? Because that's what thumma brings that to mind. Then he did that, then he did that. As in, he decided to do this, then he decided to do that, then he decided to do that. Right? That is what comes to mind. And the Mufassirin have addressed this. And they've said that this brings into question irada, the more in-depth meaning of irada. Last week we discussed Allah's divine will, right? Now Allah is giving us another understanding of His divine will. He's saying that sometimes you think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills something, it must happen immediately. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, no. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge is pre-eternal. Right? Allah knows from the beginning everything. It's not Allah's going to decide this now and then He decides something else and then no, this is this means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not know. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. And that is what it means to be pre-eternal. Is that His knowledge isn't like ours, where we decide something and then something happens, then we decide something else. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free of this ignorance. His knowledge is pre-eternal. So that means that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills something, no matter when it happens, it is still part of Allah's will. They've called, the Mufassirin call this suluhiyya, irada suluhiyya, and irada tanjiziyya. In other words, potential will, which is a poor translation, but it's good enough. Potential will and actualized will. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills something, it comes into being, it is Allah's will. Right? When it comes into being, it is Allah's will. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, it was Allah's will. It's just something for us to understand a little bit deeper the nature of divine will, Allah's divine will. Beyond that, I would not advise going beyond. Because many people have gotten lost beyond this. When I say many people, I mean the Mu'tazila. It is what made the Mu'tazila is that they pushed beyond this. Inshallah. So then, the next question that comes is now that because of the arrangement of the ayat, because we know thumma means then, right, which means after this, then this happened in sequence. The next thing comes in that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this ayah then says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the earth before He created the heaven, essentially, the sky. Right? And they say, ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى إِلَى السَّمَاءِ فَسَوَّاهُنَّ, and then He fashioned and He balanced. That's what فَسَوَّاهُنَّ means over there. فَسَوَّاهُنَّ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said He intended now to turn towards the sky. فَسَوَّاهُنَّ. And so He fashioned or He balanced, or it's a beautiful way for the word for making something perfect. Sab'a samawat. Just a quick issue. Hunna over here is a pronoun, and usually a pronoun comes after the thing that it said to refer back to. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does something quite amazing in that He puts the pronoun before the actual words He's talking about. So the first thing I've given an explanation as in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying like, there He comes, the Amir. You know, it's more emphatic, like to show like subhanAllah, something amazing is coming now. فَسَوَّاهُنَّ. Hunna? What? سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ. So there's a little bit of tone in there, you know, for gravitas, subhanAllah. So the seven samawat, which means the seven heavens is the way it is translated. So yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Mufassirin say this sama over here is the sama al-dunya. Right? To give you an idea, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Ayat Quran, فَسَوَّاهُنَّ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ. SubhanAllah, the exact words escapes me now, but Allah says that in the sama al-dunya, right? The first sama, He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has adorned it, right, with stars. So then the Mufassirin say that whichever way, as far as you can see stars, that is still samawat al-ula. That's sama al-ula, the first heaven, the heaven of the dunya in other words. Right? So I think, I'm not sure how far we've advanced yet, but according to my last study of this, the telescopes are still only to see that everything that they can see so far still has stars. So they're saying that is still part of Sama Dunya, Sama Ula in other words, the first heaven. Right? So there are, as you can imagine, yes, seven. You know, it's just to give you an idea of the scope of Allah's creation. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put it here. You know, Mufassirin say it is not. Sometimes because the discussion happens here as to some parts of the Quran are talking about when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the heavens first and then the earth first, right? So and then the discussion happens about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the earth and then He made the heavens and then He flattened the earth, and that is, you know, they reconcile between them. And Ibn Abbas, he also offers an explanation saying that this word thumma over here is not so much about sequential, but rather about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala providing an argument. So He is saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this and He created that. So it's not so much about sequence, but more about listing all the things not in sequential order, you know, which is also a valid opinion. But ultimately, the best explanation I've heard from us was from Sha'arawi, who says that is not the point of this ayah here. The point of this ayah is to put you in awe of Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal, of His ability to create things that you cannot even fathom. Right now, you can't even see past the first heaven. Right? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also ends with وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٍ. And He is over all things knowledgeable. Because His knowledge, He is giving us, is only it's trinkets that He's scattering around for us, so that we can understand Allah Rabbul Izzati, His knowledge, His eternal knowledge, the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we can recognize that He is the one who created everything, and He is the one who knows everything. After this ayah, these are the two fundamental ayahs over here of Aqidah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then moves on to a discussion about the first man created, also the first prophet. And Allah says, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts with the word إِذْ, always add in udhkur. In other words, remember remember when, as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the past. Remember when. Here we go. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ. Remember when, O Muhammad, your Lord said, رَبُّكَ قَالَ, said, لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ, to the angels, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ, indeed I am making, فِي الْأَرْضِ, in the earth, خَلِيفَةً, a khalifa. Now, all of these words here, they don't need any tafsir from us, because they are quite clear. The only word that is of importance to us now is the word khalifa. The word khalifa has been translated as vicegerent in Tafsir Jalalain and many translations. Right? But the crux of this word is that khalifa comes from the word khalf, which means behind. Right? And khalfiyah would then mean that which has been left behind. And that's how you get to the word successive, or succession. And so, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this word in this context of here, He says, I'm going to make in the world that which would, an entity that will succeed each other, one after the other. You know, in other words, it's succession plan. Generations that will succeed each other, one after the other. Which does change the perspective of the ayah a little bit from the translation. So from this point of view, right? So that's as if that's what the angels are receiving. Right? That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to create on the earth. They then respond to that by saying, قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد وفيها ويسفك الدماء. Are you going to make in it one who will yufsid, in other words, divert from the path of uprightness, right? And he will yasfikud dima, and the one who will spill blood. While وَنَحْنُ, we نُسَبِّحُ, we glorify, وَبِحَمْدِكَ, we glorify you with praise. We glorify your perfection with praise. وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ, and we purify, we sanctify you. And this is قال, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُ, indeed I know that which you do not know. That's the ayah over there. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has now given us the first story in the Quran. This is the first one. And He starts with Nabi Adam. Obviously, this was not the first ayah revealed in sequential order or in chronological order, but it is the first ayah on Nabi Adam in the Quran from when it was now put in from the Mus'haf's point of view, so to speak. So the Mufassirin say that the significance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not mentioning all the ayat of a particular prophet in one place is so that Allah can highlight the lessons in it. That's why many people, well not many, but some people say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeats things in the Quran. Yes, there is repetition, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never ever repeats something without there being a different meaning attached to it because of the context. And so if you pay close attention to where Allah repeats things in the context, you will find a very different story, even if the ayah seems repeated. And they say that the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also spoke about different prophets in different surahs as well, and not containing it to one surah, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also wants us to make connections between the whole Quran, so that we are able to build our understanding holistically and not just within specific places only, and pick and choose what it is that we want to accept and not. Like, for example, Nabi Musa's story is split over many. It's one of the biggest stories in the Quran, actually. It's split over many surahs. and actually a perfect example of where in 3 different surahs, 3 different parts of Nabi Musa's story are told. But they're not told in chronological order either. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that what happens to people, no matter the timeline, whether it's last or second or first, it is all one story and all connected. Sometimes you think that what happened to you first is not connected to what will happen to you last and vice versa. But this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indirectly teaching us is not the case. As we'll see from the time Nabi Musa was put in the river to the time Nabi Musa was splitting, one body of water saved him, the other body of water saved him again, but in 2 very different ways. And so the connotations become staggering and mind-blowing. But inshallah, I want, when we get there, we will deal with it, inshallah. But for now, the thing to take cognizance of that this is where the journey begins. So the questions that arise over here with Khalifa is the one being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the question of Nabi Adam being the carrier of all of humanity from the beginning to the end is contained in the word Khalifa. Right? So this entire discussion that's going to take place now is not just about Nabi Adam. It is actually, because of the use of the word Khalifa here, it's about all of us. And so what you don't take cognizance of that further on in the surah, Allah makes the angels and everyone bow down to this Khalifa over here. So one of the implied meanings in all of this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked them all to bow down to mankind, essentially, to all of mankind, which is quite a profound notion. And further in the surah also, I'm just making the connections, but we'll get there, is also where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allama Adam al-asma' kullaha. So this also has connotations within the concept of Khalifaship as well. Because Adam subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Khalifa, in other words, he has all the successive generations within him at this point in time. He's created with it. And that is the entity Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches all the names to. Yeah, so keep all of these connotations in mind when you attach meaning towards the name Khalifa over here. The first thing that the Mufassirin take note of over here is that they say that now they say that the glorification over here that the angels are talking about, it says نَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. They say that this over here is something that they think this is the excuse, or rather this is what they are doing that the human beings are not doing over here. Yes, يَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاء, and they are going to corrupt the natural order of things. Now, it is the Mufassirin highlight that they give this as an alternative, or rather as an objection to why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would create essentially us on the earth. It says that we glorify your perfection. The Mufassirin say that it is that this nusabbihu and this bihamdik and when nuqaddis is when you say subuhun quddusun, glorified is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in perfection or beyond perfection, bihamdik. And they say the praise over here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he is perfect and praiseworthy in everything that he has decreed. Right? So I think it was Imam al-Razi who said that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Inni a'lamu, indeed I know ma la ta'lamu, what you do not know, it is that part of the people that would succeed in generations would be those who would then nusabbih bihamdihi wa nuqaddisuhu. they would do this. They would be the ones who would say Subuhun Qudusun. They would be the ones who would say Alhamdulillah. They would be the ones who would say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. And they would be the ones who would sanctify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, I said this is the aqidah of the Muslimin. In other words, La ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. In that way, they sanctify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. La ilaha illallah. The connotation of Quds over here is that anything which speaks about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that causes deficiency or causes any imperfection or any resemblance to creation, that is what is the opposite of that. So by the Muslimin saying La ilaha illallah and living that kalima of La ilaha illallah, kalima tahdeed, they are nuqaddisun. They are sanctifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this. Now, this is the beginning of a longer discourse, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bunches this ayah 30, 31, 32, and 33 together. And the tafsir is actually cumulative in that we will inshallah discuss it all together. And inshallah next week I will elaborate more on all the amazing aspects of this ayah in connection with the other ayat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken about over here. But for now, inshallah, we will conclude on this ayah, and we will make dua inshallah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us understanding of His deen and of Kalamuhu al-Azim, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who truly imbibe the message that He is teaching us, and grant us to be of those who meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willingly. Meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because we want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are excited to meet Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal. It is the Jannah that we are hoping for, to meet Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us to be of these. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us to have husn dhan of Him, to have always a good assumption of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our dealings with His creation and in our communication with Him, Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Rahman Rahim, Malik Yawm Al-Din, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta 'alayhim, ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Amin. Allahumma faqihna fi ad-din, wa 'allimna at-ta'wil wa tafsir al-Quran, wa zidna 'ilman nafi'an wa wasi'an wa rizqan tayyiban wa halalan wa 'amalan